You have never worn a uniform that changed who you are. Or so you think. Put you in the right clothes, the right room, the right title, and something in you shifts. You would not believe it. Nobody does, right up until it happens to them. In the summer of 1971, a psychologist named Philip Zimbardo built a fake prison in the basement of Stanford University. He put an ad in the newspaper. $70 a day, 2 weeks, for healthy young men willing to take part in a study of prison life. Over 70 people applied. He picked 24. Ordinary students. No history of violence. No criminal record. Coin flips decided who became a guard and who became a prisoner. That coin flip is the whole story. Nothing else changed. Same men. Same values, same morals, same childhoods, walking in the door that morning. Only the label was different. By day 2, the guards had started humiliating the prisoners. Push-ups as punishment, sleep deprivation, solitary confinement in a closet. Prisoners were referred to only by numbers, never by name. One prisoner had a breakdown so severe on day 36 hours in that he had to be released. The study was supposed to run 2 weeks. Zimbardo shut it down after 6 days. Why? Because the guards were not the same men who walked in. Something about the role itself was doing the work, not their character, not some hidden cruelty inside them waiting to get out. The uniform, the title, the permission structure of the situation. You want to believe you are the exception. Everyone does. Ask yourself honestly, though, have you ever noticed your own voice change when you put on a badge, a title, a name tag? Manager, teacher, officer, even something as small as team captain. You do not become a different person, but you start acting like the role expects you to. This is not just a story about a basement in California. It reaches back much further than that. For most of human history, you lived in small groups. 50 people. 100, maybe. Everyone knew everyone. Your reputation followed you everywhere, because there was nowhere to hide it. If you broke the rules, the group remembered. If you helped someone, the group remembered that too. Roles existed, but they were worn lightly, because the person underneath the role was always visible. The hunter was still your cousin. The elder was still the man who taught you to swim. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm spent decades studying small-scale societies, and he found something remarkable. These groups actively worked to suppress dominance. If someone got too powerful, too controlling, the group would gossip about him, mock him, exclude him, sometimes exile him outright. Egalitarianism was not an accident. It was maintained, deliberately, by people watching each other closely enough to catch the first signs of a role swallowing a person whole. Then the groups got bigger. Somewhere around 10,000 years ago, agriculture changed everything. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. And for the first time in the history of your species, you could interact with someone who did not know your name, who would never know your name, whose entire understanding of you began and ended with your title. Soldier, tax collector, slave, priest, king. The role stopped being something you wore over yourself. It started being the only thing the other person could see. Psychologist Stanley Milgram ran a study a decade before Zimbardo's that asked a related but different question. Would ordinary people hurt someone just because a person in a lab coat told them to? He recruited volunteers under the pretense of a memory experiment and told them to administer electric shocks to a man in another room every time he got an answer wrong. The shocks were fake. The man was an actor, but the volunteers did not know that. 65% of them delivered what they believed was the maximum voltage. Enough to kill someone. Not because they were cruel. Because a man in a white coat, standing beside them, calmly said, "The experiment requires that you continue." The coat did the talking. The role did the talking. You have felt a version of this yourself. Maybe not with electric shocks, but you have said something at work that you would never say at your kitchen table. You have enforced a rule you privately thought was ridiculous, because that was the job. You have watched someone get mistreated in front of you and said nothing, because it was not your place, because someone above you was handling it, because the situation had a shape and you did not want to be the one who broke it. This is not weakness. This is architecture. Your brain evolved in small groups where roles were transparent and reputational memory kept everyone honest. It was never built for anonymous hierarchies, for badge numbers, for chains of command stretching so far up that no single person feels responsible for the whole. Here is the part almost nobody talks about, though. The guards in Zimbardo's study were not identical. Some of them refused to escalate. They followed the rules, but stayed decent. A smaller number were the ones who turned genuinely cruel, inventing degradations nobody asked them to invent. The situation created the pressure, but it did not erase every difference between people. Something in some of them pushed back against the role, even while wearing it. That is the hopeful half of this story, and it usually gets left out. Because if the situation were truly all-powerful, resistance would be impossible. It is not impossible. It is just rare, and it is costly, and it requires you to notice the shift happening in real time, which is exactly the hard part. The guards who stayed decent were not stronger or better people in some abstract sense. They were paying closer attention. They kept asking themselves a question the others stopped asking. Is this still me? Or is this the uniform? That question is available to you too, every single day, in rooms with far lower stakes than a fake prison. In meetings where you agree with something you do not believe. In group chats where you pile on because everyone else is piling on. In moments where a title, a role, a crowd, gives you permission to be someone slightly worse than you actually are, and you take it, because it is easier than being the person who says wait. Zimbardo later called this the Lucifer effect. The idea that ordinary, good people can be transformed into perpetrators of evil, not through some hidden darkness inside them, but through systems and situations engineered, sometimes accidentally, to make cruelty feel routine. He spent the rest of his career studying the opposite question too. What makes some people refuse? He called them the ones who kept their identity switched on, even when the situation was begging them to switch it off. You are wearing roles right now that you did not choose the shape of. Employee, customer, citizen. Someone assigned you a badge number the day you were born into whichever systems surround you. And most of the time you never notice the badge at all. The coin flip that sent those 24 students down 2 different paths in 1971 was random. Nothing about who they were determined which side they landed on. But something about who they stayed, or refused to stay, once they got there, was not random at all. You will wear a uniform today. Maybe not a literal one. A tone of voice you use with your boss. A version of yourself you become in a crowd. A role that tells you exactly how to act, if you let it. The real question was never whether the uniform changes you. It was always whether you notice it happening while it still can.